Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pierre Fayers. I'm the director of the Center for Blue Governance, and I will give you an overview of what is the blue economy. So the blue economy has been an emerging concept during over the last decade, and it has really been promoted as can say an international concept during the Samoa Conference in 2014, where many island states and also a few continental states such as Bangladesh were pushing for the promotion of the blue economy. 2 years ago, we had this large conference in Kenya about the blue economy, and in Bangladesh, we had this 2014 large conference. It was the first one in the country to promote and set up the rules for the development of the blue economy. You can see on the bottom of the slide that now we can decline or we can mention blue, almost everywhere, from the growth to the blue bond to the blue finance, etc. What is also important is to consider that the blue economy is part of the SDGs. You can find them. We can find some blue economy components almost everywhere. Of course, for the SDG 14 related to decisions, but also for the one on the 13 related to the carbon or the climate change, and for the one for the first one as well, regarding the poverty, regarding the food issues, etc., etc. But the key issue we are facing at the moment is that the blue economy for many countries and for many policymakers is still, we can say, a very standard approach in the way that they substitute the word maritime to blue, and they are continuing to develop the different sectors of the maritime economy in the way that they are more or less independent, or they think that they are independent. So it's a very standard approach. Even the World Bank report on the blue economy is keeping this very standard approach where we have a silo approach instead of a coordinated one. So if we look at, and I think this is a very interesting piece of work done by UNECA, the blue economy for policymakers as a handbook, we can see that the blue economy is a multidimensional concept. So it links, of course, the pillars of the sustainability, which is the economics, the social, and the environment, but it also links the different level of decisions and also the different components of the economies. So you can see this on these two slides. So, and maybe one of the key important other concept is the circular economy here, which is also the ecosystem-based management that should be promoted. So we are facing some major challenge. The first one is the planning. Why we need some planning? First, we need some planning. Otherwise, we will have, I think, like in Dhaka, or Chittagong. I think it's Chittagong in the bottom. Just traffic jam. So when we have traffic jam, the economic activities is not very good, and also is a very tiring process for everybody who wants to invest. So we want the maritime spatial planning just to ensure that all activities are developed in a very good ways without having any negative externalities, or to have them as low as possible. So that's really the aim of developing the maritime spatial planning as a tool to implement the blue economy. The coordination is also something quite important to look at and important to address, in the way that without the coordination, as I mentioned before, everybody or every ministry will want to develop its own sector without considering the other sectors, and hence the maritime spatial planning. The ecosystem services are also very important to take into account, in the way that with the climate change effect, they will be the one that will support the blue economy. And they will support it not only for the fisheries, but also for the blue carbon sequestration, etc., which contribute quite significantly. And in Bangladesh, with the Sundarban, this is something very significant. And also, we need some accounting. Without the accounting, we don't know if the blue economy is performing well or not. So we need to be able to record the economic performance, but also the environmental performance and the social performance of the blue economy policy that we implement. And the other one, the things that we need to be careful of is not about dreaming too much about the blue economy. So the first things that the blue economy policy should address is fixing the existing problem. that's the major things to do. Okay, many countries try to jump directly to the number 3, which is the innovation and developing new areas. But if you don't fix your problem, you will not be able to innovate properly, or you will innovate, but it will be quite in a disorganized way. So the first one is about fixing the existing problem, and after you need to also to enhance the performance of the current value chain. For instance, for the fisheries, you need to put some value added into the fish. It means that not to export some raw material, but to export some processing fish. Innovation, of course, is important. The biotechnologies is something that is a key sector to develop, especially with all the natural resources that we have, for instance, in Bangladesh, like the algae, the seagrasses, etc. The fourth one is about determining to have a key, to have a very good knowledge about the potential and the constraints. Okay, so what do we have? What can we do? And this is something that needs to be done quite quickly in order to make some precise plans. So the things also to have in mind that the blue economy is really an inclusive process, and it should be equitable. So the easiest part to start with is really to work with the existing policies. So we can try to implement new policies, etc., but it's very important to fix or to improve the existing one, or the implementation of the existing one. For instance, all the trash fish that we can see, this is in Cox's Bazar on the picture, should be addressed, and it has been addressed very recently. The land-based pollution, the environmental protection, etc., within the context of the national determined contribution, should be done before thinking about developing some new sectors or new idea. So all of this really caution the need for a blue governance, something that make the articulation between the different policies and also between the different stakeholders. So the blue governance will address, the first should raise their, should provide a very good insight to have the people aware of the importance of ocean and water. Should deal with the coordination, the planning, and the accounting. Provide the evidence about the potentials and also the constraints, and ensure that we have the capacity in the country, the domestic capacity to run the blue economy policies and the implementation, and also to ensure the compliance to the rules. And for this, of course, we need the maritime sovereignty and also the availability of the information. So I thank you very much for this. We have lots of material that's available on the platforms, so I encourage you to read them. They are very interesting, and if you need, you can contact me and other people, also the people from the Maritime University. So thank you very much.
I'm Dr. Mohawk, a senior lecturer in hydrogeology based at University of Portsmouth. So today, I'll be talking about climate change and geomorphology in Bangladesh. As you may know, that these climate change related hazards we are concerned about, like flood, storm surge, these are various geomorphological processes. So understanding them in the context of geomorphology would be very useful. And that's what we will be doing today. I got this title slides, Geomorphology and Climate Change in Bangladesh, but I would like to start with the fact that climate change is impacting human and their systems. What I mean by that, if you think of climate change, you would be thinking of change in temperature, precipitation, and sea level rise, or in sea level. So that would be causing problem to agriculture, water resource, human health, coastal area, species and natural resources in general, including forestry. So these things will have an effect on human livelihood, their social network, infrastructure, and not to mention their health, causing morbidity and mortality. So when all these things would be coming in the form of natural hazards, the problem will be initiated because of these natural hazards. So what's the framework? So if you'd like to see geomorphology, here what you see, and the climate. So in climate, in this diagram, you can see temperature, rainfall, and these things has a direct effect on the geomorphology, which is the process responsible for giving rise to various landform. So if you take this example here, this is a meandering river in a floodplain. So these things form because of erosion from one place. Would be taking these sediments, transporting them, and depositing them somewhere else, causing formation of new landform. And these geomorphology and the climatic attributes are not beyond human influence. As we know, the climate change is very much induced by the human activity, and so is the geomorphology. Is also because we do this flood protection embankment, we construct bridges, we construct roads. All these things will be affecting the geomorphological processes. So if we'd like to see various geomorphological agents, in that case, temperature, wind, humidity, atmospheric pressure, precipitation, clouds, all these things could be taken as geomorphological agents. And they would be responsible or working with various geomorphological processes like flood, erosion, landslides, drought, cyclone, storm surge, thunderstorms, so all these things. And these, although they are geomorphological processes, but for our livelihood, our infrastructure, or for our social network, our health, these things are natural hazards. So after this session, what you should be able to do, this session including the reading materials provided under this session, you should be able to describe the geomorphology of Bangladesh or Bengal Delta in general, which includes part of India, West Bengal. List main climate change related hazards, explain climate change impact in relation to regionalized geomorphological settings. So different parts of the country has different geomorphological settings that lead to different climate change related hazards. Understand the interaction of blue economy related anthropogenic geomorphology. So geomorphology, when you say it's mostly natural, but because of this human action, this geomorphology is modified in some areas in a dominant form, causing this anthropogenic geomorphology. That's what we will touch as well. Finally, you should be able to recognize the role of engineering geomorphology when it comes to tackling climate change related impact. Okay, so first, if we look into the geomorphology and landform context of the Bengal Delta or Bangladesh, we must remind ourselves that we are a delta with a huge catchment in upstream areas. So we receive 1.72 million kilometers square area. The water coming in those areas will be drained through Bangladesh, if you put it that way. Bangladesh from maybe from West Bengal. So it's a vast drainage catchment. And if you look in the eastern side of the country, we have these Indo-Burman range, which will have an effect on the geomorphological settings because it's technically very active. And within the delta, within the country itself, it's very much unconsolidated sediments and easy to erode. And if it is easy to erode, then it would be easy for transportation, redeposition. So this geologically young, unconsolidated sedimentary nature is also a factor making Bangladesh very susceptible to various geomorphological processes. So these are the three higher level control we have in the geomorphological processes in the country. So if we look into various geomorphological attributes on a national scale, so this is the elevation data for Bengal Delta, you see, and we have this is the hilly areas, the hotter color indicating the higher the elevation, and the cooler color indicating the low elevation. So you can see Bangladesh is a very flat country. It's 80 meter there, 0 meter, I mean, it's at sea level here. And it's very flat, except we have these track here, Madhupur track and Barin track. These are basically making these river valleys in here, you can see. So, and you see the these marginal areas in West Bengal, you have this stable highland, and in these sides we have highland, but it's very technically very active. And in between you have this active delta plain where all these geomorphological processes going on in a very active way. And we have this shallow massive there. And if we do a cross section along this line, you can see these river valleys, Ganges, Brahmaputra, or Old Brahmaputra in Sylhet. So these are very active in the sense of geomorphology. So all these things has an effect on the various hazard we experience within this area. So if we look into what are those hazards, so it's a natural hazards. Basically, they are geomorphological processes. Rainfall and thunderstorms. This is more or less everywhere. Drought, you see, it's very much limited to the western part of the country. Flood, again, it's everywhere, but mostly in these blue shaded areas. Flash flood, if you see, these are mostly in hilly areas in eastern parts of the country. You can see. Landslides, it will be mostly in Chittagong, part of the hilly areas. And if you see this extreme tide or sea level rise and salinity intrusion, cyclones, storm surge, all these hazards are confined mostly in coastal areas of the country. In subsidence, this is a very deltaic settings, young sediments, so subsidence is everywhere, but mostly again at higher rate happening in the coastal areas. And the coastline is also changing. So these are the major natural hazards we experience. But on the geological sense or on the physical sense, these are various geomorphological processes. So if we now look into this rainfall and flooding, you can see this is a little bit busy diagram, but two things you need to look in here. The first one is the rainfall pattern. If you see, we have most highest rainfall there and in these areas. But strikingly, if you come to Rajshahi or this area, rainfall is the lowest within the country. And you can see these are the areas where we have this drought condition. So you can see how geomorphology has enough control on the drought hazards in here. And on the other way, if you like to look into this flash flooding, we have flash flooding around these areas. These areas is because we have this very high rainfall, particularly in the earlier part of the rainy season. If you have lots of rainfall coming in one go when ground is not ready to absorb a lot of this water infiltrate, so they would cause flash flooding. And in terms of the rainfall pattern, it's controlled by the topography again. So you see in if you'd like to see in April, July, this time of the year, what wind direction is this way. In winter time, wind will be coming from through this gap this way. They have an effect on the rainfall distribution pattern in the country. And the fluvial flooding in the country, it's a severe when two things coincides. So when you have this upstream flow and the local rainfall comes together, then we have normally severe flooding. So you can see how these things are linked. So now if we move into coastal areas, so coastal processes and hazards, we can look into, again, from the geomorphological sense, if we look, that's based on climate change. So in that case, because of the climate change, we will have the sea surface temperature rise, and that would cause buildup of high pressure, buildup of the low pressure system in the sea areas. This low pressure system, what happens when you have this low pressure, sea level will rise to compensate with this pressure system. And you have this very high wind rotating with this high water table there. And that rotating wind will be bringing that water mass on the land. And that's basically storm surge. And if they coincide with the high tide, then we would have severe storm surge. So that would be limited in the coastal areas. And then in coastal areas, we have another dimension. If we think of blue economy, in a traditional sense, most of our blue economic activities are restricted in the coastal areas, not in this offshore sea much. Nearer to the sea, we do this fishing, and within the coastal areas where we have this low-lying tidal flatland, we have this agricultural activity there, so land reclamation, and we also have some forest activities. All these things, you could take them as blue economy. But this economic activity has resulted in agricultural deforestation and tidal land acquisition. And this deforestation and this tidal land acquisition has an impact, knock-on effect on various geomorphological processes leading to natural hazards. So if we look into how these tidal land acquisition happening, just to have a sense. So this is Daku area in southwest Bangladesh. And you can see this is these are the tidal rivers. We have around 100 of them making puncturing the coastline, if you see. And these are the entry point for the Bay of Bengal, particularly during these low pressure, when low pressure buildups, and if there is a storm even coming, storm surge coming, they will be taking those paths to ingress the land. And to protect these coastal areas, low-lying areas, we come up with these embankment all around this river. And this is not only one. We have 125 of these polder all along these coastal lines. And if you look, these are made out of mud, basically, and they look like this. So what we are doing in here, we are protecting this land from high tides and storm events for agricultural activities. So by doing that, we are artificially creating a barrier along this line for irrigation of water from the sea or from upstream to downstream towards the sea. So these embanked area are deprived from sedimentation. So we have some consequences of that. Yeah. But if we look traditionally or historically, these were not the case. So if you see, there's a book by William Wilcox, 1930. In that book, he explained that we have a history of using this land resource through our land irrigation system for around 2,000 years. Yeah. So, but during that time, we didn't have those infrastructure there. So we were allowing all this water to flow from upstream to downstream. So sediments were allowed to move and redistributed. So that was the case. Now we have these holders all along these coastal areas. So that causes this conflict, this geomorphological conflicts. So in a natural system, we have this unique geographical location because we are next to an active mountain range. And then we have very unconsolidated sediments, floodplain. And Brahmaputra and Meghna would be bringing lots of sediments and water. So these are the natural aspects of the geomorphology. But at the same time, we have these various infrastructure, including polder, roads, bridges, and then we have one of the highest density of population on the planet. See, and we have various pressure on various natural systems. And because of this climate change and other things, we are trying to come up with various mitigative measures. All these things are in conflict with natural systems. But it doesn't mean that we will not be trying to protect us from those natural hazards. We will do that, but we need to do it first, understanding those geomorphological processes, and then how we can engineer them in a way that geomorphology will have a place to play, will be able to go without much restriction. At the same time, we will not be impacted in a severe way. So for that, and the blue economy, what we know until now, it will change because we have this vast Bay of Bengal. There we will have much more renewed economic activities. But with all this development, we must not forget that we need to lead with these geomorphological processes so that we don't create these cascading hazards, because these natural hazards could affect these critical infrastructure, like health system, a major highway which is connecting various cities. So if these things affect, then they would lead to further hazards. So we would like to avoid those things by understanding the geomorphology. So we also need to make space for geodiversity so that we don't destroy or control big geomorphological features like rivers and these things. Finally, so we need to work with geomorphology to reduce the impact of flood and prioritize. So whenever we are building any construction in coastal areas, we must remember that coastal areas is very much sensitive to sedimentation. The sensitivity may not be reflected in some situation in decades, but over a couple of decades or over 3-4 decades, there could be a huge real problem, like Boulder is causing a lot of problem at the moment because of this sediment deprivation. So with this, I will finish my session. However, I would like to make some key points. That the first one is the geomorphological settings of Bangladesh makes it most vulnerable country in the world, particularly for tropical cyclone and storm surge. And many future risks, because climate change is happening, but it will be much more intense, particularly for countries like Bangladesh. Some of these processes still going on. We are seeing them as a natural process, but those natural processes might turn into hazards. So we need to understand them. And in Bangladesh, coastal areas are particularly vulnerable. And whenever we will be doing more and more this adaptation to climate change, but we need to consider this socio-ecological risk and understanding of the geomorphology so that we can integrate them into our sustainable development processes. Thank you, everybody. If you have any question, you can email me. I will try to respond. Thank you.
This is Brahmaputra Delta's and its extension that covers the opportunities and challenges. I'm Dr. Aftab Alam Khan, Professor of Oceanography in BSMR, Maritime University, Bangladesh. Before I go to the presentation, I would like to give a preamble of my presentation that covers Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta and its extension in the Bay of Bengal is genetically related to delta propagation. Sediments of the Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta are the principal sources of opportunities in the perspective of georesources and ecosystem. Simultaneously, the same sediments are the major cause of many challenges this delta is facing since its formation. Terrestrial sediments from the Himalaya deposited over the ocean floor of the Bay of Bengal are the major source of oil, gas hydrates, metallic and radioactive minerals, in addition to all kinds of nutrients being supplied to the living organisms. Supply of more than 1 billion tons of sediments in the offshore delta every year provide opportunities in building prograding delta by accretion, wherein one of the largest continental shelf advancing seaward through accumulating sediments to form numerous sandbars and islands. However, all these opportunities are countered by the major challenges due to the recurring adverse events, viz. Massive siltation, inland and coastal flooding, deterioration of navigation routes, large-scale land loss by bank erosion, submarine landslides, high-pressure mud formation, free natural gas escape, cyclone, storm surge, saline water encroachment, security and pollution. All the opportunities and challenges are not associated with climate change impact. Climate change is a natural phenomenon that cycles through glacial and interglacial periods. In 100,000 years, the present Earth is passing through the interglacial period. The notion of climate change is an idea and not a science that circulates international diplomacy and domestic politics. Opportunities and challenges are associated with the variable physical and anthropogenic process operating in decadal to millennium time scale. The opportunities are needed to explore and nourish for the benefits of sustainable economic development, while the challenges are needed to face and manage through good governance, proper professional human resource development and management. Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta, my presentation, the study area of my presentation, that's the Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta. This delta, as you know, it covers entire Bangladesh and the Bay of Bengal. And the delta is a prograding delta which is receiving enormous sediments every year, about 2 billion, more than 2 billion tons of sediments each year. So these sediments are the major cause of many challenges of the GBM delta facing since its formation. Opportunities and challenges are the characteristic attribute of the GBM delta, occur in composite form, of which some are linked to the natural processes and some are linked to the anthropogenic processes. However, basic parameters of climate environment are temperature, rainfall, snowfall, wind, water, sediments. Those regulate weather pattern. Climate change occurs between glacial and interglacial phase occur in about 100,000 years, known as climate cycle, and which can be seen in the following figure. The figure shows that we have climate change for about last 420,000 years, which is having a prominent cycle of 100,000 years between glacial and interglacial. So we can only change the climate, or we call it climate change, between the glacial and interglacial. Now the GBM delta, which has been formed due to the supply of sediments from the Himalayan orogenic belt, since then it started to pour into Bengal basin, filling the basin both vertically and laterally. This formation of the Bay of Bengal goes back to about 185 million years and led the initiation of the formation of Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta about 50 million years. Formation of the Bay of Bengal is linked to the seafloor spreading from the Southeast Indian Ocean ridge and 90th ridge megashell. This is my figure shows that sediments which is coming into the Bengal basin and the Bengal Delta and the Bay of Bengal is all from the Himalaya in the north, which is about 2,500 kilometers long east-west supply of the sediments source. And this is the illustration of the GBM Delta, how it has been prograded since last 18,000 years. So in the 18,000 years, the delta was much inland, but by 3,000 years back, the delta has formed to such an extent that it has formed almost the present configuration. Now, the climate system, as we know, is defined in the third IPCC working group as the interactive system consisting of 5 major components: as atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the cryosphere, the land surface, and the biosphere. So we cannot attribute the climate change with the opportunities and challenges of the Bengal GBM Delta. These components are regulated, influenced by the external forcing agent. Mostly importantly is the sun. These changes are due to the external forcing such as plate tectonics, Earth's orbital force, and sun strength. Köppen climate classification, which divides the climate into 5 main climate groups: tropical, dry, temperate, continental, and polar. And each group is divided based on the seasonal precipitation and temperature patterns only. Okay, as I have told, that opportunities, there are so many opportunities GBM Delta has. Similarly, we have lots of challenges that need to be faced. So in conclusion, I would like to give a very fundamental opportunities and challenges which facing the GBM Delta. Conclusion. In the conclusion, the opportunities and challenges are the integral part of the holistic development of the Ganges-Brahmaputra Meghna Delta and the Bay of Bengal. Opportunities are: number 1, natural resources of non-living category such as sediments, economic system, biodiversity, oil and gas, gas hydrates, calcium carbonate, and economic minerals. Number 2, development of biological resources, especially marine and estuarine fish of living category. Number 3, active prograding GBM Delta for stable and progressive continental shelf. Number 4, sediments to the tune of more than 1 billion tons deposited each year in the continental shelf. Number 5, new islands counterbalancing the subsidence to land acquisition, marine and beach tourism, trading and shipping facilities, and deep sea port. These are the opportunities which GBM Delta has, but the challenges are massive deterioration of inland and coastal navigation system, saline water intrusion and encroachment to contaminate groundwater system, to destroy freshwater and mangrove ecosystem and biodiversity. Various kinds of pollution, both inland and offshore, have been the major challenges in the recent time. Last but not the least, study revealed that sediments, supply, and all the atmospheric events are the regular physical processes. Those control almost all the opportunities and challenges. None of the opportunities and challenges are associated with the climate change fantasy.
I'm Mustafa Hussain from Bangladesh Agriculture University, and I'm going to talk on present status of the ecosystem and species diversity in the Bengal Delta. You know, Bangladesh has a unique position in the subtropical region within the delta of 3 great rivers, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Meghna. Our delta is very rich in aquatic biodiversity. The vast wetlands, wide river bed system, enough rainfall, and warm temperature play significant role in the aquatic biodiversity of Bangladesh. It is a delta formed by the alluvial deposits of three rivers, as I said earlier, the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna. Among 405 rivers of Bangladesh, 57 are transboundary, 54 with India, and 3 with Myanmar. And the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna river system drain a total catchment area of about 1.72 million kilometers square through Bangladesh into Bay of Bengal. Out of this large catchment area, only 7% lies in Bangladesh. And other core riparian countries of Bangladesh are India, Nepal, Bhutan, and China. Vast natural floodplain of Bangladesh cover about half of its area, nearly 80,000 kilometers square. And nearly half of the people of the country live and rely on the floodplain and their ecosystem service. Nonetheless, along with the livelihood, floodplain environment is also perilous and exposure to annual flood, cyclone, flash flood, drought, and these are making the communities vulnerable. The vulnerability caused by climate change, coupled with a number of man-made factors like damming in the upstream, infrastructure development, water abstraction, pollution, widespread encroachment, and rampant overfishing. In Bangladesh, we have some biodiversity hotspots, like in the northeast, we have Haur area in the Sylhet Mymensingh floodplain. In the central part, we have Cholon Bill, the largest bill of Bangladesh. In the Jeshore Coast area, we have Oxbow Lakes. Oxbow Lakes means the formal levee of the dead rivers. And then we have, in our hilly district, we have Kaptai Lake. This is the largest man-made lake of Bangladesh. And we have Sundarban. Still, after all these years, Sundarban is the largest contiguous mangrove forest globally. Regarding water resources and fish production of Bangladesh, according to Department of Fisheries 2018, we produced 4.13 million metric ton fish in Bangladesh. Mostly come from aquaculture, about 56% from aquaculture, only 28% from capture fishery, and rest 15% from marine fisheries. Regarding aquatic animals, as I said, Delta used to be very rich in aquatic biodiversity. We have shrimps and prawns, about 62 species. We have equal number of crabs, lobster, mollusks. And regarding fish, we have about 300 inland species and 475 marine species, plus 35 exotic species introduced from different countries. Then we have frogs, turtle and tortoise, crocodile, alligator, snakes, birds, whale, porpoise, and dolphins. The dominant freshwater group, I have to say, we have Indian major carp, 3 Indian major carps, Rohu, Katla, Mrigel, and 4 Indian major, and Kalibaus as well, 4. And then we have large catfish, minor carps, and then we have small catfish like Tengra, Batasi, Kajuli. We have river sets, that means our national fish, Hilsa. We have snakeheads, 4 or 5 snakeheads, Gojar, Shoal, Taki, etc. We have freshwater eels, Baim, Gucci, Kucha. We have featherbacks, 2 featherbacks we have, one is Chitol, other one is Poli. Then we have about 80 perches. That means koi, chanda, these are. And then we have loaches. Loaches means gutum. We have around 35 gutum, very colorful species. And then we have anchovies, gobies, that means bele, glassfish, chanda species. Then we have mallets, minnows, and barbs. Barbs means putti. And the contribution of riverine fisheries in 94-95, the contribution was about 13%. In 2004-05, it dropped to 6.5%. And very dangerous that in 2014-15, it dropped to only 4.75%. Still, the riverine production in Bangladesh only 300 kg per hectare, and it's decreasing. 2015, IUCN Bangladesh updated the checklist, and under the checklist, we assessed about 253 species, and we found that more than half, 52% fish under different threat category. 40 data deficient, near threatened 27, vulnerable 25, endangered 30, and critically endangered 9. We also assessed the crustacean species, about 114 species we assessed, and we found that 64% evaluated species under different categories of threat, like data deficient 79, 10 vulnerable, and on critically endangered. So the scenario is very, very grim. Having said that, when we assessed IUCN red list, we could not declare some fish extinct, although we knew that those fish are extinct from Bangladesh. But to follow the IUCN criteria, we cannot do that because we need to wait 20 to 30 years. So I enlisted about 25 species, those are possibly extinct from Bangladesh. And when you update next red list, maybe we have to declare these species extinct from Bangladesh. What are the causes, different causes of biodiversity loss in Bangladesh? All of us know the major causes. Loss of natural habitats. We are not providing, we are destroying the natural habitat of our fisheries. And then aquaculture. Aquaculture is also harming our open water aquatic biodiversity. And then overexploitation. It's a populous country, we need fish, and wild fish are most demanding and with high price. That's why fish are trying to catch all the wild fish as possible, and over-harvesting is rampant, it's going on. We introduced 35 exotic species. Those are really harming our own aquatic biodiversity. And then different types of fish harvesting method, very disastrous, like and dangerous, like water abstraction, like using poison and other method. And in Bangladesh, it's a small country, it's a rice growing country, so we use about 100,000 metric ton pesticide in the rice field and other crop field. Maybe we don't need all those pesticide because most of our farmers are not very literate, so they use, maybe they need 5 grams, they use 50 grams. So this way, all these pesticides, many are banned. These are going to our open water bodies during the monsoon. And then pollution, the country is growing, country is developing, so there are lots of different kind of industries going on in Bangladesh, and their untreated effluent are causing mass mortality in different parts of Bangladesh of our fisheries. In the present scenario of Bangladesh rivers are first heavily silted, totally polluted, and then they're gradually encroached by some influential people, elite people, and maybe with some political influence. They try to encroach the river, and they're successful to do that. And then finally, the rivers are disappearing from Bangladesh. If we consider the climate change, the Bengal Delta is most at risk from climate change. The next 30 years is very, very important, very, very crucial for Bangladesh. The Delta is going to face the biggest change from the global warming and biggest challenge from the global warming. Poverty, large low-lying coastal regions prone to floods and cyclones are making Bangladesh one of the most exposed country to climate change. So there are lots of different pressure on our fisheries, and it's harming our fish species and most of our inland fishes, those are very micronutrient rich small fishes, are gradually disappearing from Bangladesh. And to talk about the suggestion recommendation, I have some suggestion to make. We need to modify our existing infrastructure inside the water bodies to make them fish friendly. All the bridge, culverts, sluice gates, dam, barrages need to be modified. And in future, whatever we build, we need to consider the biological and ecological need of our fisheries. And we need to use pesticide rationally, inorganic fertilizer. We cannot continue using hundreds, thousands of tons of pesticide in our crop field. And we need to maintain minimum 1 meter water depth in our water bodies. If we use all the water to irrigate our crop field, this is very harmful for our fisheries. We need to regulate our gear, and then we have to establish, build nurseries and sanctuaries. We need to implement the stock enhancement. We used to do that. In some 10 years ago, we used to release the hatchery reared juveniles and seeds to the open water bodies. We need to continue that again. Zero tolerance to new exotic species. We already introduced 35 species, no more exotic species. And then we need to establish more community-based organization and strict application of the existing laws, rules, and regulation. Finally, the last slide, only eco-friendly, improved and innovative management practice with insights on technological, environmental, and socio-cultural concerns can ensure the sustainable species and ecosystem diversity of Bengal Delta. The Delta needs science-based assistance to find effective ways to preserve and sustain its ecosystem and species. This is our pride, heritage, and livelihood of millions of people before they are lost forever. Thank you.
Welcome to my presentation. I am Professor Dr. Mohammad Rakhnuzzaman, Department of the Fisheries, University of Dhaka. Today, I'd like to talk on the marine biodiversity and coastal vulnerabilities in mangrove ecosystem in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a very small country having huge marine and coastal resources and biodiversified ecosystem. And the coastal zone of the Bangladesh is geomorphologically and hydrologically dominated by the Ganges, Brahmaputra and Meghna, that means the GMB, and the Bay of Bengal. And the coastal zone covered the 32% of the country, having the 19 districts with around of the 35 millions of the people, represent to 29% of the total populations of the country. And the mangrove in the southern coastal part of the Bangladesh are significant globally because of their size, geological settings, biological diversity, and the natural resources and livelihood support potentialities. So our marine and the coastal areas represent an aggregation of the population, an asset of the growing economic, geopolitical, and socio-cultural significance, yet their functions are increasingly challenged and worsening the coastal hazards and vulnerabilities. So at first we have to know what is the biodiversity. Biodiversity is an all-inclusive term to describe the total variation among the living organisms of our planet. In its simplest form, biodiversity or biological diversity is therefore life on the earth. And this biodiversity was coined first by the Walter G. Rosen in the 1986. But we have some different components of the biodiversity. For example, number one, the genetic diversity, which refers to the genetic variation that occurs among the members of the same species. Secondly, the species diversity, which refers to the variety of the species or other taxonomic groups in an ecosystem. And thirdly, the ecosystem diversity that refers to the variety of the biological communities found in the earth. And finally, the functional diversity that refers to the variety of the biological functions, process, characteristics, and partial ecosystem. Now we have to talk about the marine biodiversity. What is this? Marine biodiversity refers to the species, richness, and abundance in the world's ocean and the seas. For example, the mangrove ecosystems, coral reefs, grass beds, estuaries, and the hydrothermal vent, and the seamount and the subsediment in the ocean floor. Of course, it is called life in the seas and the oceans because the world is covered by the 30%, 70% of the water, and life in the ocean enormous and huge diversified. Approximately 32 out of 33 described animal phyla are representing in there. You can slide. You can find the schematic illustrations of the pragmatic simplifications of the marine biodiversity. Where are the restricted extent of the information is selected depending on the relevant viewpoints and the question asked. Now, in the coastal and the marine biodiversity in the Bay of Bengal, Bangladesh is very, very resourceful, and we have a lot of biological resources in the marine ecosystem. We have a lot of flora and the fauna. We have approximately 168 algae or seaweed that is very, very important for us. And we have lots of corals. We have the molluscan, 336 species. We have some shrimps, crabs, lobsters, and we have a very resource in the fishes, 475. And we have some mammals, that's very important, those who are right now extinct. Now, why marine diversity is important? Marine diversity is important because humans are dependent on the marine diversity on the earth for the resources and their livelihood, health and the well-being. And the ocean constitutes of the 90% of the habitable space of the world, and 30% phyla are exclusively marine, whereas only one phyla is exclusively the terrestrial. And the coastal systems such as the mangrove, the salt marshes, and the seagrass meadows have the ability to absorb or sequester the carbon at the rates up to the 50 times those of the same area of the tropical forest. On the other hand, the coral reefs are the nurseries of the oceans, and they are the biodiversity of the hotspot. On the subtropical coral reefs, for example, there can be the 1,000 species per square meter. So this is huge. So healthy marine ecosystems is very important for the human society since they provide the different services, including the food security, livelihood, feed for the livestock, raw materials, medicine, building materials, and so on. So what causes if the loss of the marine biodiversity, the marine diversity, types of the human activities that damage the marine organisms and ecosystems are overexploitations, physical alterations, habitat loss, pollutions, and introduction of the alien species and the global climate change. And how is it hard to protect the marine biodiversity? Because it is very hard. Because the protecting marine diversity is challenging, too difficult to monitor of the impact of the human ecological footprint. And oceans are unseen of the most people. And oceans are often, due to the inexhausted resources and their lives outside of the jurisdictions of all countries and all nations. So how can we protect the marine diversity? Yes, we have a lot of things to do to protect the marine biodiversity. For example, mind your carbon footprints and reduce the energy consumption first. And then make safe, sustainable seafood choices. And then use the fewer plastic products and help take care of the beach. And don't purchase the items that exploit the marine life. And be an ocean-friendly pet owner and support to the organization working on the protect of the ocean. And finally, influence the change in the community. So the coastal vulnerabilities. The coastal vulnerability is a spatial concept that identifies the peoples and the places that are susceptible to the disturbances resulting from the coastal hazard. And hazard in the coastal environment such as coastal storm and erosions pose the significant threats and the coastal physical, economical, and the social systems. So Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world in the climatic disasters. And because the more than 80% of the populations are potentially exposed to the floods, earthquakes, droughts, and more than 70% of the cyclones, severe flooding, and occurring the 4 to 5 years, and 60% of the land occurred in this country. So now I would like to discuss some kind of the dimensions of the vulnerabilities. Vulnerability have the 3 dimensions. Number 1, the exposure to the stresses and the associated with the sensitivity and the related adaptive capability, these orders. And you can see here the vulnerability as a combined function of the exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity that is from the Plotsky. So here the mangrove, what is the mangrove? Mangroves occur worldwide in the tropics and the subtropic region. And a mangrove is a shrub and a small tree that grows in the coastal line on the brackish water, and the term is used in the tropical coastal. The vegetation consists of the such species. So what services we can get from mangrove ecosystem? We can get a lot of things from them, from the livelihoods, mangrove ecosystem services, and climatic regulations, fisheries, tourism, water filtration, and so on. And the most important thing is that the tsunamis, mangroves can reduce the loss of the life and the damage of the tsunamis by taking the first burn to the impact and dissipating the energy of the waste. So what is the vulnerability in the mangrove ecosystem? The climate changes, particularly is associated with the sea level rise, is a major threat and will have the significant impact on the sensitivity of the tropical and subtropical coast, especially on the mangrove ecosystem. For example, the most critical components of the vulnerability assessment were found in the exposure components of the relative sea level trends and sediment supply, and sensitivity components of the forest health, recent spatial changes and creation rates, and finally, adaptive capability. And what are the threats? A lot of threats are there in the mangroves. The mangroves are lost. The climatic change losses used to the mangroves. The coastal development, the pollution effects, and the aquaculture and the agriculture and the logging systems makes the threats to the mangrove ecosystem. So what about our Sundarban, a World Heritage Site and the largest mangrove ecosystem in the world? And why is Sundarban unique in the largest single tract mangrove forest in the world? Because the mangroves of the Bangladesh are significant globally because of the size, geological settings, biological diversity, and the natural resources and the livelihood support potentialities. The 50% of all major minor mangroves in the world and 41% of the mangrove in the world. And it can earn the 41% of the total revenue and produces the 45% of the total timber and fuel wood of the Bangladesh. So what the vulnerabilities in the Sundarban? The major vulnerability of Sundarban is rapidly expanding the cold stream aquaculture system, climatic change, for example, the sea level rise, increase in the storms, cyclone, and the frequencies and intensities, sea level rise, and disturbances events, for example, the storms, cyclones, and outbreaks and invasion of the species. And the recent year, the biggest regional threats to mangroves are the ever-increasing development of the tourism industry and pollution from the runoff fertilizers and pesticide and improper disposal of the waste. So what will happen if there is no mangroves in the world? The mangrove, it can lead to the severe losses of the biodiversity and the livelihoods. In addition to soil intrusion, coastal areas and siltation of the coral reefs, ports and shipping lines, tourism would also be suffered. And how can we protect the mangrove? There are lots of ways we can protect our mangrove ecosystem. To help the protect this ecosystem, look for the sustainable alternatives to eating farm shrimp from the mangrove areas. Find the local conservations and government organization in your area that are working to conserve the mangrove forest. So we have some conservation plan. If we follow, we can conserve our forest by the naturals. We have some impact factors. That's, for example, the anthropogenic and the natural calamities. So if we control such kind of this, we can conserve the forest. We have some sustainable forest management. If we consider those issues, so it will be possible to protect our vulnerabilities in the mangrove ecosystem, in the coastal ecosystem. So we have some recommendations. What are the recommendations? We have to ensure the native and the dominant plant species first, and agro-plant species that could be ensured to the food security of the coastal community. And number two, the political commitment and wills are necessary. And number three, mangrove forest landscape changing the pattern of the shrimp farming at coastal mangrove wetlands should be stopped, and to stop the destruction of the sensitivity ecosystem and coastal habitats. That's all.
I am Rezaur Rahman. I am a professor at Institute of Water and Flood Management at Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. This module will help us in understanding the immense economic values of the services that we get from ecosystems. The ecosystems consist of biotic components like plant, animal, microorganism communities, and abiotic components like air, soil, water, etc. The main characteristics of ecosystem is that it can sustain life, including human life. And this ecosystem services includes provisioning services, regulating services, supporting services, and cultural services. So here are some examples. For example, rivers gives us water, fish, energy, transport. Floodplains recharges groundwater. Deltas retains sediments, nutrients. Mangroves protects us from cyclones, hurricanes, and so on. So these services we get from these various types of ecosystems are free. Because these are free, so mostly we underestimate their values, especially economic values, and that's why we frequently overuse these services and sometimes even abuse. So these ecosystem services contributes to various constituents of human well-being. For example, in security, it provides basic materials for good life. It contributes to good health and good social relations. Now, deltas are new landforms. For example, our Bengal Delta, it is the biggest delta at the mouth of Ganges, Brahmaputra, Meghna, and it is the newest delta on this planet. Deltas like Bengal Delta provides with various types of products like agriculture products, fisheries, and it gives us protection from cyclone storm surges, against sea level rises, and so on. Deltas are usually overpopulated because it is fertile and it can support large number of population. In order to improve the well-being of this large population, we frequently intervene in the natural processes of delta. For example, we build dams, we build barrages to divert water, we build embankments along the rivers to protect us from the flooding. But when we do intervene in the natural processes, it interferes with various ecosystem processes. For example, embankments creates a barrier between river and floodplain, so it interferes with the soil formations on the floodplain. It interferes with fertilization of the floodplains, and thereby it ultimately impacts on our food production. So the total economic value of different types of services that we get from ecosystem consists of 4 types of values, like direct values that we get from ecosystems, fish, firewood, water. Indirect values are like water quality and flow, water storage and recharge, nutrient cycling, and so on. Option values are the premium that we place on possible future uses or applications such as pharmaceuticals. And non-use values are intrinsic significance of resources and ecosystem in terms of cultural value, aesthetic value, heritage values. So there are varieties of tools and techniques for economic valuation of ecosystem services. For example, when there are commercial implications of products of ecosystems, we use market pricing. For example, that fish that we get from rivers or oceans or estuaries, they have direct market values. So the market price of that products is the value of the economic value of the ecosystem services. Sometimes ecosystems have indirect influence on market prices. For example, if there is a lake, it increases the value of the residential plots, nearby residential plots. So we can estimate that increase in value because of the lake as an economic value of the lake. So this is called hedonic pricing method. If the ecosystems has recreational value, then we usually use travel cost method. For example, the people spend significant amount of money to visit important ecosystems, for example, beaches, forests, and so on. So this expenditure is actually an estimate of the recreational value of that ecosystem services. And once we have a good understanding of the ecosystem services and the economic value of these ecosystem services, we can use that estimate to make payment to the affected people who are making this sacrifices their lives and livelihoods for making the ecosystem services sustainable. For example, we frequently compensate fishermen not to fish during certain seasons, so that fisheries production of fisheries is sustainable over the years. So this is an example of payment for ecosystem services. There is various reading materials available for understanding these ecosystem functions and the economic valuation of these functions. For example, the most important one is the publication by CAPNET and UNDP titled Ecosystem Functions and Services in Integrated Water Resource Management. There are other reading materials that I have suggested which will help you in understanding the economic valuation techniques of various ecosystem services. Once you understand these values of the services, you will be able to appreciate better about these services. And when do we understand and appreciate these ecosystem services, we shall be able to make better decisions regarding various interventions in the natural processes, especially in deltas. Thank you.
Although fish pops up in our mind when we say aquaculture, but by definition, aquaculture means culture of all aquatic fauna and flora in fresh, brackish, and marine waters. I am Nazmullah Hassan from Fisheries and Marine Resource Technology discipline, Khulna University, and I invite you all to enjoy this presentation, which I believe would help us understand how important aquaculture is for a deltaic country like Bangladesh. In this presentation, we will briefly touch upon the geomorphology of dynamic delta of Bangladesh and the factors that pave the way for productionist paradigm of development, and then we will briefly delve into the coastal development trajectory that led to expansion of commercial shrimp farming and its impact on ecosystem, and finally we will discuss about ways to reestablish the lost ecosystem connectivity to realize the full potential of aquaculture in Bangladesh as one of the important subsectors of blue economy implementation. A tiny land, Bangladesh, but being part of the world's largest bay, largest delta, and the largest single tract mangrove forest, Bangladesh is blessed with fertile alluvial soils, favorable tropical climate, and readily accessible surface and groundwaters that support diverse agricultural activities for the lives and livelihoods of millions of people living on this soil. 19 out of 64 districts in the coastal zone, covering an area of 47,200 square kilometer, which is roughly 32% of total landmass of the country. Out of these 19 districts, 12 face the Bay of Bengal directly and are at greater risk of natural calamities and sea level rise. Coastal zone of Bangladesh is one of the highly productive ecosystems of the world due to regular supply of nutrient-rich seeds and organic matters from the Sundarbans, and therefore the population of coastal zone is higher than the interior districts. However, since the topography is extremely low and flat, it has always been vulnerable to natural calamities causing extensive damage to crops, assets, and lives. While this has been the case for centuries as the delta evolved and shaped in a dynamic fashion, two most important landscape and land use changes, including construction of earthen embankments during 1960s and expansion of export-oriented shrimp farming during 1980s, created opportunity but at the expense of inevitable ecosystem consequences. Earthen embankments, popularly known by their Dutch term polder, were constructed during the 1960s to protect lands from tidal inundation and flooding, to ultimately increase rice production. By 1980s, polders became part of the natural setting of Bangladesh with a network of nearly 5,700 km long embankments in 139 polders along the coastal area of Bangladesh. Polders affected the dynamic process of coastal land erosion and accretion, and soon the lands within the polder had become waterlogged with saline water to the extent that it was no longer financially viable to culture rice, defying the very purpose for which these polders were built. Eventually, the affected farmers were compelled to convert their croplands into shrimp farms. With 260 freshwater species, 475 marine species, and nearly 100 shrimp species or crustacean species, the fisheries and aquaculture has emerged as the most promising subsector because of its contribution towards food security, employment, income, and export earning. Subsector-wise, fisheries has been maintaining an average 3 to 4% to national GDP, and within the agriculture, the GDP rose from merely 7% in 1975 to over 25% in the last fiscal year. As has been said, fisheries contribution has been increasing steadily. However, as shown in this graph, It is the aquaculture that registered phenomenal growth, while production from open water capture and marine fisheries remain stagnant, signifying the importance of aquaculture subsector in Bangladesh. Aquaculture growth is so impressive that despite being a small country, Bangladesh is the 5th largest aquaculture producer in the world. It is also a major export earning sector of the country that realized over 500 million US dollar during the last fiscal year. And the rise and development of shrimp industry as an exclusively export-oriented entrepreneurial activity provided much of the impetus for the fisheries sector to emerge as a major export earning industry. However, a close inspection of the production and export trend of shrimp shown in this graph reveals that, coinciding with declining production since 2000 onwards, shrimp production and eventually export volumes have been declining, resulting in unsteady export growth of the shrimp subsector. With the advent of shrimp farming, the economic change in coastal Bangladesh has been dramatic. Shrimp has transformed the entire coastal communities, southwest particularly, giving them significantly higher level of income and food security. However, the transformation has had many corollary impacts on the dynamics of coastal ecosystem. The impacts on ecosystem are largely speculative, but include the effects of saltwater on agricultural land, natural vegetation, loss of natural vegetation, livestock, loss of many ecosystem services of mangroves, destruction of biodiversity, and other forms of land and water degradations. As shown in this map of Polder 3 in Shatkhira district prepared by CEGIS, one can see numerous red dots along the southern and eastern side of Polder 3, which represent illegal boring of the earthen embankment to draw saline waters from the rivers by the farmers. Such unplanned and extensive modification of the natural settings raised a serious and legitimate question whether the economic gain by shrimp industry is at the expense of the ecosystem of the coastal areas. To realize the full potential of the coastal zone of Bangladesh, we need to understand and implement ecosystem-based farming that is in sync with the coastal natural dynamics. For example, creating a 200-meter setback area along the tidal rivers having mangroves, shrimp farming should be confined to 500 meters where the saline waters can enter during tidal cycles. Behind this, a 100-meter area should be allocated for salt-tolerant bushy plants, and in slightly saline area further inland, freshwater aquaculture, including less saline variety shrimp, that is freshwater shrimp or golda, should be cultured in a polyculture. Such ecosystem-based farming based on landscape and land topography should be implemented. Integration of mangroves with shrimp aquaculture provides multiple ecosystem benefits. We have recently showcased that in addition to ensuring good water quality and better shrimp growth, shrimp survivability and growth not only improved, but also the planted mangroves along the primary canals and in the dikes of ponds can provide multiple ecosystem benefits to the farm, to the farming community, and to the entire ecosystem. The mangroves can also trap sediment and restore natural flow of canals and rivers, which are a major problem at this moment in southwest coastal areas. Another important issue that needs to be addressed is integration with wider agriculture, agri-aqua system towards resilient, intensified, and diversified agriculture and aquaculture system in coastal areas based on land topography, tidal inundation, salinity, land elevation, and the community integration based on land types and their farming preferences. And in this case, we can do year-round shrimp and fish farming in saline area. At the same time, rice prawn shrimp farming in fresh brackish area during wet season when the salinity drops to a certain threshold level to allow culture of freshwater shrimp and other freshwater fish species in the same pond. In conclusion, ecosystem of coastal Bangladesh supports various aquatic and terrestrial resources that have been used for centuries by the community. The ecosystem community connectivity collapsed due to largely to boulders and partly to commercial shrimp farming, unplanned commercial shrimp farming. Commercial shrimp farming transformed many families with income and jobs, no doubt about this, but it has also created many social environmental problems and impacts, including access to common properties. While the aquaculture of Bangladesh has tremendous strengths and opportunities, as listed up here, it also suffers from many weaknesses that need to be addressed to realize the full potential of this important sector. The two most important being the system diversification and portfolio diversification. I'd like to close this presentation with a call for building with nature approach for aquaculture, fisheries and other developments for sustaining a healthy and productive coastal ecosystem in Bangladesh. Coast is not merely an intertidal zone. Rather, that interaction extends far beyond in both ways. Therefore, efforts should be made to understand the interconnectedness of social and ecological systems as to move away from productionist paradigm to an ecosystem-based building with a nature approach. Building with nature approach, aquaculture fisheries based on land zoning, dynamics of topography, tides and salinity should be adopted to manage coastal aquatic resources in a sustainable and equitable fashion. Thank you very much for your interest and wish you all the best in your higher academic pursuit.
Hi everyone, I am Professor Abdul Salam working in the Department of Chemistry, Dhaka University. I have a group, those who are working on environmental chemistry on different aspects like air, water and also soil and in the urban, rural and also in the marine environment. And today I will speak on the marine pollution in the delta. I will especially focus on the Bay of Bengal in our region. The overview of the talk is like I will speak about the delta, then what is marine pollution and types of marine pollution. I will give a special emphasis on microplastic in the Bay of Bengal and sources of marine pollution and how atmospheric pollution contribute to the Bay of Bengal region. And finally, the prevention and control of marine pollution. Overview. Ocean covers 71% of the planet and it has important role on chemical and biological balance of the life in the earth. And Bay of Bengal is it's like a big delta with Bangladesh, India and part of Myanmar. And Ganga, Brahmaputra and Meghna, these three rivers coming directly to the Bay of Bengal. And all the pollution from this region like IGP, Indo-Gangetic Plain brings through this river to the Bay of Bengal. And JBM Delta is one of the biggest or largest delta in the world, not by area but by population, more than 1 million population living in this area. And the infrastructure of this area, population and environmental condition and also poor urbanization exist in this JBM area. And JBM area like Ganga, Brahmaputra and Meghna Delta is very important because it has a lot of population density is very high. On top of that, there are two important things, especially for Bangladesh area and in part of India, Sundarban, the largest mangrove forest in the world, and also the longest sea beach, Cox's Bazar. Therefore, the environmental pollution or contamination in this JBM Delta is very important and we need to know. And the people also in this area mainly based on agriculture, and agriculture is also affected by the pollution. Then comes to the question, what is marine pollution? Marine pollution is the pollution is coming from maybe sea or maybe ocean or maybe land to the marine region, and in general we termed is marine pollution. This type of pollution does not only cause a great loss of marine flora or fauna, but it also cause severe impact on human health and also the foodstuffs and also the ecosystem in the nearby area. There are many types of marine pollution. I am not going details all of them, just I would like to mention here. Number one is the ocean acidification. How does it happen actually? Carbon dioxide is one of the global warming agent, and this carbon dioxide, the greatest largest sink is ocean water, and carbon dioxide coming to the ocean in contact with water, and it's absorbed in the water surface, and it reduces the global carbon dioxide burden. And it's sometimes good for global warming, but it's bad for the structure like calcium carbonate or chloral or shellfish living. Because if there is calcium carbonate, when carbon dioxide dissolves, the pH of the water are getting lower. That means it becomes acidic. And this acid, calcium carbonate dissolve in acid, and that's why the structure made of calcium carbonate changes. And there are a lot of other toxic substances coming to the Bay of Bengal or JBM Delta, like pesticide, DDT, phenols, heavy metals, arsenic, lead, cadmium, and polychlorinated biphenyls. A lot of agricultural activities happening in this area, and this wastes goes to the river and canals, finally ended up in the Bay of Bengal. So, and another thing is eutrophication. There are a lot of nutrient also coming with this wastewater, and that decrease the dissolved oxygen and increase the growth of the biological system exist in the ocean. So sometimes it's good, they need nutrient, but sometimes it's really bad if it is over nutrient. And plastic pollution, the most important one and widely discussed one nowadays in the world. And it's not biodegradable. It's one thrown in the water, it exists there for 100 years. There is a small statistics like 1 million plastic bottles are purchased every minute, and 8 million metric tons of plastic goes into the ocean every year. Can you imagine how big the number is? And they destroy or if harm for the dolphin, turtles, sea birds, sharks, and many other biological system exist in the river or in the ocean. So they are there. And noise is another thing. So, some animals, some fish, they don't like noise. They cannot do their normal activities within the noise environment. So ship passing, seismic survey, and oil exploration, this maybe sometimes makes a lot of noise that destroy the normal habitat of ecosystem in the Bay of Bengal or in this delta. And microplastic, the very small tiny particles, plastic that comes in the ocean, that we call microplastic. And only there is this research, only Ganga River has 3 billion microplastic that entering Bay of Bengal every day. So can you imagine how big the number is? And there is another estimation, microplastic concentration at the mouth of the river near Bhola, Bangladesh is between 1 billion to 3 billion in numbers. So that release from Ganga, Meghna, Brahmaputra river basin. So the Bay of Bengal really in serious condition due to the microplastic pollution. And there are other sources also for marine pollution like wastewater, sewerage, point source, non-point source, like city garbage, agricultural waste, industrial waste, sea, and also other metal, oil and sediment. A lot of ships are carrying oil and others. Sometimes accidentally they release this oil on the sea, and that causes severe bad impact on the animals or fish, and also sometimes plants in there. And marine microbiology also very important for them. And there is some research study on atmospheric pollution that contributed to the marine pollution in this delta. One is atmospheric ground carbon. This normally in the winter times, all the pollution from IGP coming to this Bay of Bengal, and that somehow contaminated the water and also the environment. And this coming like vehicle exhaust, smoke, cooking fires, and industrial discharge. And we also have another recent study on ozone pollution in this region. And this is the area where we focused, is near very close to Bay of Bengal, and we found that the concentration of various chemical species is really high in this area, and they are coming from different types of sources like power generation, rural transportation, residential emission, agricultural waste, and many others. And another important things I would like to share here, even in the rural area, how atmospheric pollution contribute to the ocean. And all the haze coming from IGP goes to the Bay of Bengal. And at the end of February, they are coming back to the land. And for that reason, very close to Bay of Bengal, we found the concentration in February for aerosol optical depth is almost double in Dhaka. So air pollution also badly contaminated the ocean environment in the Bay of Bengal region. Finally, how we should control and prevention of marine pollution in this region. I wrote many points here. If we go one by one, just like removal of the pollutant, adoptive appropriate methods to remove heavy metals from marine pollution, radioactive metals reduced by ion exchange, and control oil pollution, there are many other techniques. And also, most important one is the policy and public awareness. I would like to say the public awareness is also very important for the marine pollution, and also government policy. We have some rules to control the pollution, but still government policy should be executed for mitigation of marine pollutions. Finally, I would like to see there is no pollution, and thanks everybody. This is my group, those who are working in the Department of Chemistry, Dhaka University, on the atmospheric pollution and also marine pollution. Thank you everybody.
Hello, my name is Francis Graves. I'm an architect and senior lecturer in the School of Architecture at the University of Portsmouth. I currently run a postgraduate studio in architecture focusing on design of urban and architectural developments in various locations, responding to climate change through global heating induced flooding. This can include responses to fluvial and pluvial flooding, as well as climate change induced rise in sea levels. I've been a member of the Centre for Blue Governance at the University of Portsmouth for over a year now, and studying issues relating to architectural landscape and urban design in Bangladesh with colleagues from different disciplines is an attractive proposition to me. This slide demonstrates how the low-lying nature of the land in Bangladesh and its vulnerability, especially in coastal areas, to cyclones that batter Bangladesh regularly. Okay, on to slide 2. Slide 2 is of 3 maps: Bangladesh, the coastal areas, and the Sundarbans. Bangladesh mainly consists of low-lying delta, including low-lying ground around the Maghana and Padma or Ganges rivers and the Brahmaputra. Bangladesh's capital, Dhaka, although not on these main rivers, is inland, is also surrounded by smaller river and does also flood. According to the Financial Express, Bangladesh's coastal area represents about 20% of the total country, the whole country, and 30% of the net cultivable area is also found in this area. An area of mango forest to the west of the coastal zone between Bangladesh and India, the Sundarbans, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. However, it is currently under threat from natural and man-made phenomena. For example, fluvial and pluvial flooding, as well as sea level changes, and the coal-fired power station at Rampal, currently being built 14 kilometers to the north of the Sundarbans. India has implemented the building of infrastructure to protect mangrove forests and agricultural land in the Sundarbans. This is an aerial shot of the Sundarbans, demonstrating that some of the mangrove forest has been maintained as a barrier to the new dike that has been created. Bangladesh has learned to cope by setting up various flood control infrastructures and schemes. Has also learned to cope by setting up various flood control infrastructures and schemes to prevent floods from occurring, including man-made infrastructure such as dikes, levees, and embankments. This is an impressive project in India to protect the Sundarbans. You can kind of see the location from the previous slide, and this one shows it at ground level. Bangladesh was originally mainly agricultural lands with no lack of vegetation. However, as a result of rapid growth of its populations, many people moved into towns and cities, abandoning the lands in favour of urban areas. The flood defences were not reinforced when urbanisation accelerated. They remained the same as they were when they still had forests and agriculture on them. This made the new urban fabric more vulnerable to flooding. A small number of cities and towns in Bangladesh's coastal area do have published information about them relating to climate change. However, the study of development in the area is in its infancy. Slide 6 is of Bangladesh, the current situation, and the first 3 slides at the top here show 1, the erosion of an embankment, 2, a reinforced embankment, and 3, here, a river, fluvial flooding in Bangladesh, where a river has burst its levees and has flooded the surrounding land. You can see quite clearly the levees and the flooded floodplain behind. The 3 pictures at the bottom are of existing flooding of schools and educational establishments in Bangladesh, and the last one is of children being ferried by boat on the water to their institution. These are some of the causes of flooding in Bangladesh. In 2010, in Bangladesh, only 28% of its population lived in urban areas, and it's still strongly reliant on agriculture for exports and income today. Ploughed land is more prone to erosion and reduces the time lag of the water cycle. Bangladesh established a 26-step flood action plan, FAP. However, the deforestation at the base of the Himalayas has decreased water retention and reduced the water time lag further. Climate change / global heating has been instrumental in generating floods due to the melting of snow from the mountains. Additionally, Bangladesh's flood control technology is not as developed as in more economically developed countries like the UK and the Netherlands. Flood warning systems in Bangladesh are poorly developed, and many civilians are only given warnings of 5 to 6 hours before the flood occurs, which does not provide them with enough time to safely evacuate the area. Bangladesh has heavy monsoons between June and August, and also currently experiences coastal floods and high tidal waves. Bangladesh does not have much advanced technology. As a result, it lacks infrastructure that are well maintained enough to hold off rainfall and coastal floods. This shows diagrams and drawings of building infrastructure in response to flooding, and includes levees and embankments and dikes. Areas behind these are generally called polders. 1 and 4, that's diagrams 1 and 4, show how polders can be created, so 1 and 4. 2 is a 3D view of an embankment, including a road on top with urban development behind. 3 demonstrates how an existing flood defence can be reinforced by sloping the land gently from the top of the existing defence down to the existing level of the polder behind. Number 5 suggests the location of pumps and pumping stations on the polder behind the flood defences. These are all flood defences. We also teach in Portsmouth about retreat and attack strategies, and we'll come on to that later. Here we go. Architectural responses. So 1 at the top here, you can see vernacular architecture that exists in Bangladesh built on stilts. And that is one form of attack strategy, building buildings on water with stilts, or building buildings in the second example here close to water on stilts. The 3 pictures at the bottom are of floating architecture. These approaches to architectural design can lead to interesting solutions. I've included a photograph of Louis Kahn's Bangladeshi assembly building in Dhaka, as architect Louis Kahn developed his language of modern architecture through the various designs for his assembly building, resulting in his version of critical realism, an architecture that could only be in Bangladesh. It proved to be his greatest building. However, he didn't see it completed, as it was finished in 1982 and he died in 1974. Listed on this slide also are various flood-resistant, resilient features that can be integrated into both infrastructure and architecture and be an integral part of the design. Combining engineering infrastructure projects with architecture is deemed to be fundamental, as the combination of infrastructure and architecture in many instances may very well support architecture in many instances, and yet they're often conceived separately. It is hoped that the developing urban design and architecture in Bangladesh responding to global heating, climate change, and induced phenomena, including flooding, starting from the local vernacular, will or can develop a new form of architecture that also takes on a Bangladeshi character, hence developing another modest form of Louis Kahn's critical regionalism.
A very good afternoon, everyone. Very good evening, very good morning, wherever you are based in the world. We're delighted, together with Professor Islam, to introduce you to the Blue Economy and Coastal Communities, or human rights-based approach. Before we start, I'll give the floor to Professor Islam for a short introduction of herself.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to be here and do this presentation for this short course. I'm Professor Rumana Islam. I teach at Dhaka University. I'm a faculty at the Law Department. And I did a few works on blue economy, but basically my focus of area of research is international investment law, and then with its related issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rumana. On my side, I'm Professor Shukroon. I also teach international economic law and human rights. I'm based at the University of Portsmouth in the UK, but most of my work has to do with South Asia, India, Bangladesh, and East Africa, and generally the developing world. All right, so let's go on. So the Blue Economy and Coastal Communities for human rights-based approach. So you may note that the UN on December 2017 has declared a decade for ocean science and sustainable development to be held from 2021 to 2030. It's now. So the class and this discussion is extremely relevant. The decade's main objective is to provide a common framework for ocean science to support the realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is centered around 6 key societal outcomes: a clean, healthy, resilient, predictable, safe, sustainably harvested and productive, as well as transparent and accessible ocean. Along the same lines, ocean literacy is promoted to understand the human influence on the ocean and the ocean's influence on people. Along the same lines as well, indeed, you have ocean literacy. Then let's move on to the Blue Economy Nexus. As you can see here, the Blue Economy can be put at the center of a complex nexus involving trade, but also investment, constitution, human rights, citizens and non-citizens, the law of the sea, the coast state, international community, labor law. So it's extremely complex. I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, Professor Islam, to maybe go a bit deeper in what is the Blue Economy.
Thank you, Leela, for that great introduction. Since we have a very short time, so I will be just pointing out to the very basics of what is blue economy. So over the year, this has become quite a buzzword in the 21st century, and the idea has become quite impressively popular. International society believes that blue economy covers actually three aspects: economic forms, economic coping with the global water, innovative development, economy, and development of marine economy. So if we can go to the next slides, because I think yeah, thank you. So blue economy and sustainable development goals. As Leela already had mentioned a little bit about it, but the concept of blue economy is based on a sustainable development perspective, and it is urged that the policy needs to be designed to address the conceptual framework for blue economy that can be used to assess sustainable marine management and develop a management framework of blue growth, emphasizing that it requires joint efforts to promote blue growth and achieve sustainable development goals that is targeted by 2030. And if we look into the United Nations SDG goals, which was adopted in 2015, as already Leela mentioned a little bit about it, it adopted 17 sustainable goals, and one of them was SDG goal 14, which was to make a call to take action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. And specifically, SDG goal 14 seeks to conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, marine resources for more sustainable development. So if we talk about blue economy and the coastal communities, if we look into the world, billions of people around the globe, especially in the poorest countries, rely on ocean as their main source of survival. Ocean provides them jobs, foods, and keep their economy growing. Therefore, without a blue economy policy that actually addresses the socio-economic aspect of the coastal communities worldwide, will actually not ultimately serve the purpose of achieving the SDGs. The current state of usage of requires that urgent need to sustainably use, manage, and protect natural resources. According to the OECD, ocean contributes to $1.5 trillion dollars annually in a value added to the overall economy. Hence, an integrated blue economy policy needs to be devised to address the coastal communities. And if we look into the relation between blue economy and socio-economic policies of the coastal communities, they are very much directly related. Healthy oceans, coast, freshwater ecosystems are crucial for economic growth and food production. At the same time, they are also equally essential to global efforts to mitigate climate change and hence protect the coastal communities. We all are aware that blue carbon sinks, such as mangroves, tidal marshes, and seagrass meadows sequester and store more carbon per unit than the terrestrial forests. Thereby, having a blue economy, thereby it helps to protect coastal communities from the floods and storms. On the other hand, warming oceans and atmospheric carbon are also causing the ocean to acidification, which threatens the balance and productivity of the oceans and hence impact the coastal communities. So what needs to be done? First of all, an overall integrated blue economic policy that caters the challenges and needs of the coastal communities, and this includes participation and awareness of the coastal communities for an improved fisheries management and government support and encouragement for investment in sustainable aquaculture and protection of the key habitats that could restore the productivity of the ocean and return benefits to the billions in developing countries, while ensuring future growth, food security, and jobs for the coastal communities. There is another very important issue, and that is microplastics, which have been found around the world in the food chain, air, oceans, rainwater, ice in the Arctic. Plastic pollution severely actually hurts economics, ecosystem, food security, and potentially impact public health. Serious initiatives needs to be taken and address the threat to ocean caused due to marine plastic pollution and create awareness among the coastal communities to protect the ocean from plastic pollution. Special attention needs to be paid to tourists, restriction use of plastic. Though addressing plastic pollution can only be very complex and it is a multi-sectoral and it also requires country-specific initiatives. But to address the plastic pollution, to protect the ocean on the principles of 3 R's, that is the need to be encouraged, and that is reduce, reuse, and recycle. And finally, the framework for blue economy in a particular country needs to be understood as a subject of national economy comprising an entire ocean resources system and human-made economic infrastructure in marine, maritime, and onshore coastal zones within the country's legal jurisdiction. It also needs to be complementary to the production of goods, services that have clear linkages with the economic growth, livelihood in the coastal communities, and environmental sustainability. The blue economy policy of a country needs to integrate the vast socio-economic opportunity for coastal communities to utilize the ocean resources for a social benefit and responsibility.
So as Professor Islam was clearly addressing the problems of sustainable blue economy, you can see that in order to have an integrated blue economy policy and effective governance, you need a sustainable management of aquatic and other environmental resources to ensure biodiversity, ecosystem resilience, and all that will impact the communities. An effective governance with effective participation of the coastal communities will also help to create and enable an environment for responsible private sector's investment and trade through the value chain by reducing risk and providing incentives for innovation. This will enhance the contribution of the blue economy to the macroeconomy. However, we also feel that we really need a human rights-based approach. Why is that? We need to go beyond the basic sustainability approach. And indeed, the ocean will never be safe. You remember what we said in the introduction about the sort of objective of the United Nations for a safe ocean. The ocean will never be safe. It remains a territory for major human rights violations. So we're talking about seafarers, shipwrecking, fisheries. The coastal communities are very much affected by that. So the ocean is not only the place where 90% of trade in goods happen, that's a very impressive figure, but it's also, unfortunately, the place of very grave human rights abuses which affect these coastal communities. We're talking about forced labor, modern slavery, human trafficking. They still very much characterize the blue economy. These repeated violations have been largely documented by independent civil society organizations and governments alike. Recent documentaries, for example. Again, we're talking about shipwrecking, fisheries, seafarers, and you can see here a few examples of recent films from the fiction film Beyoncé, which is based on the fact that a young, boy from Cambodia, I think, was sold to a Thai fisherman. Or the recent documentary you may have seen, Seaspiracy, shown on Netflix, which also, on the margin, I must say, addresses some human rights violation at sea. You've seen probably also some civil society reports. Some of them are very relevant to Bangladesh, with, for example, the problem of shipwrecking yards in the south of the country, in Chittagong, or indeed, other related industry. So here, some pathways for this human rights-based approach, which we feel is going to help, coastal communities really enjoy the benefit of the blue economy without suffering from its sort of extremely negative side effects. So government should systematically ratify all International Labour Organization conventions related to the blue economy and integrate the same in their national laws and also their international trade and investment negotiation. Businesses should systematically engage in human rights due diligence in accordance with the United Nations and the ILO principles, as well as the OECD guidelines. Also, we think that right to access should be guaranteed based on a liberal interpretation of the United Convention on the Law of the Sea, right to access to boats, to the ships at sea, and all the companies and enterprises with which the coastal communities work. And lastly, access to dispute settlement and redress mechanisms should be provided to the victims in simplifying access to these mechanisms. So these were for a few thoughts from us, a very short introduction to the many benefits, but also the many challenges of the blue economy for the coastal communities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your attention. I think now, since we have already come to an end, this was a very short presentation, but if any one of you have any further queries, you have our email addresses that's mentioned in our profile. So please feel free to contact with us. Thank you.
Hello everyone, welcome to today's lecture. At first, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Ashraful Alam, Lecturer, Department of Maritime Law and Policy, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Maritime University, Bangladesh. Today, I'm going to cover the following contents: blue resources and blue economy, sustainable management for blue resources, marine spatial planning, how marine spatial planning may facilitate sustainable management of blue resources, marine spatial planning in the Bay of Bengal, concluding remarks, and reference for further study. At first, let me explain what is blue resources. The term blue resources is synonymous to marine resources. Blue resources is correlated to the concept of blue economy. Blue economy is an approach of using marine or blue resources in a sustainable manner to achieve sustainable development. In the context of blue economy, we find some major blue resources are maritime transport, oil, gas and minerals from ocean, renewable energy from ocean, marine fisheries, marine tourism, and marine biodiversity. Now, let me explain what is sustainable management of blue resources. Sustainable management of blue resources means using blue resources in a way and at a rate that doesn't cause any threat or harm to the marine ecosystem. This is also popularly known as ecosystem-based management, in short EBM. Some important features of sustainable management of blue resources are: it is an ecosystem-based management, it protects marine ecosystem, it makes a balance between economic benefit and environmental benefit, it confirms sustainable use of blue resources, it looks not only for the need of the present generation, but also the need of the future generation. Now, let me tell the main thing, what is marine spatial planning? UNESCO and Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission has defined marine spatial planning as a public process of analyzing and allocating the spatial and temporal distribution of human activities in marine areas to achieve ecological, economic, and social objectives. This is a space or place-based management plan for the use of blue resources in a marine area. MSP is very similar to urban planning. We can see in urban planning, a particular area is allocated for residential purpose, another area may be for some non-residential purpose like shopping mall or playground, etc., etc. When such kind of allocation of any area for particular purpose is implemented through a plan in marine area, that is called marine spatial planning. For example, a particular area is allocated for marine fisheries, maybe another area is allocated for maritime transport, maybe another area for recreative activities like scuba diving or maritime tourism. So this kind of allocation of particular area for a particular purpose is called marine spatial planning. MSP may be developed by a single coastal state or by 2 or more regional coastal states. If MSP is developed by 2 or more coastal states, that is called transboundary or regional MSP. In the slide, you can see a sample of MSP. If you look at the slide, a particular area is allocated for renewable energy, another area is allocated for maritime transport, another area is reserved for marine fisheries. So this type of allocation under an integrated plan is MSP or marine spatial planning. Now the question is how MSP is implemented. The answer is through the maritime zoning system. In the slide, you can see this slide has been taken from the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park of Australia. There are 19 maps, and each map contains some rules and regulations. What are the activities you can do within this particular area, and what are the activities you can do or are not allowed in that area. Now the question is how MSP can provide sustainable management of blue resources. MSP applies ecosystem-based management approach. That is the main theme of MSP because it doesn't allow any threat or harm to the marine ecosystem. MSP applies precautionary principle to avoid any damage to the marine ecosystem and environment. It provides an integrated management system for consistent management. It applies spatial zoning to avoid overlapping of functions and management among the concerned departments. MSP uses marine zoning to avoid conflicting uses and human activities in ocean. It requires for assessment of impact of blue economy activities in ocean to prevent any harm or threat to the ocean ecosystem. Now, how MSP can provide sustainable management in the Bay of Bengal? You know, the Bay of Bengal is located in the northeastern part of the Indian Ocean. And in the Bay of Bengal, there is a sub-region, Bangladesh, India, and Myanmar. There are 3 littoral states of the Bay of Bengal sub-region. Apparently, you know that there is no regional or transboundary MSP in the Bay of Bengal. The main reason behind this is absence of an effective initiative by any regional organization to develop marine spatial planning in this area. Because regional or transboundary marine spatial planning is developed by regional organization based on a regional agreement. On analysis of the regional transboundary or MSP, we find that in some regions they have achieved the sustainable management. For example, MSP in the Baltic Sea, MSP in the North Sea, and MSP in the Irish Sea. Now it is a question, is it possible or is there any prospect that in the Bay of Bengal MSP can be developed through a regional organization? Answer is yes, because we know that there are several regional organizations in the Southeast Asia and Southern Asian countries. Most important one is the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, in short BIMSTEC. This is a regional organization of 7 nations of South Asia and Southeast Asia. And most importantly, BIMSTEC has adopted 3 projects. The first one is ecosystem-based fisheries management in the Bay of Bengal. The second one is impact of offshore oil and gas drilling on the marine fishery resources in the Bay of Bengal. And the last one is marine fish stock assessment, management, and development of new fisheries in the Bay of Bengal. We can see that the ecosystem-based fishery management project that has been completed in 2007, and outcome of this project is that we have found scientific data and information that will be highly beneficial for states to adopt national policy for sustainable fisheries management in the Bay of Bengal. I'm going to conclude my discussion. So we can see that blue economy has brought some new challenges for sustainable management of blue resources. A transboundary or regional MSP may facilitate sustainable management of blue resources. Several regional states have introduced MSP for sustainable management of blue resources. A regional or transboundary MSP will facilitate sustainable management of the blue resources in the Bay of Bengal. Initially, the coastal states of the Bay of Bengal may develop MSP at national level, and simultaneously they can reconcile for transboundary or regional MSP in the Bay of Bengal. At last, I'm going to refer to give you reference for further study. There is a marine spatial planning program taken by UNESCO and IOC, and the link is you can see in the file. Thank you.
So let's talk about Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100. I am Mohammad Tawfiqul Islam, working in the Reform Management and Policy Research Unit of Ministry of Water Resources, Bangladesh, as Deputy Secretary to Bangladesh government. So Bangladesh government made Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100 for achieving the vision of safe, climate resilient, and prosperous delta. We know Bangladesh is the largest delta in the world. We're living in a delta. So deltas are essentially non-permanent form of nature. We cannot make a explicit demarcation between land and water. It is not very much well defined or permanent in delta. So it is always a kind of dynamic landmass. So our delta plan had the mission for ensuring long-term water and food security, economic growth, and environmental sustainability, while effectively reducing vulnerability to natural disasters and building resilience to climate change and other delta challenges through robust, adaptive, and integrated strategies and equitable water governance. So we have set 3 high-level goals. These are our national level goals, and 6 delta plan-specific goals. For achieving those high-level goals, the goal of eliminating extreme poverty by 2030, for achieving upper middle-income country status by that time, and to be a prosperous country beyond 2041. For doing that, we need to achieve our delta plan-specific goals, like ensuring safety from flood and climate change-related disasters, ensure water security, ensure sustainable and integrated river system and estuary management, conserving and preserving our wetlands and their ecosystems, and developing effective institutions and governance structure for doing that. And the final goal is to achieve optimal use of our land and water resources. So here is the framework for a Bangladesh Delta Plan. We considered 3 kinds of variables. Endogenous variables include economic growth, employment generation, and poverty reduction. But these endogenous variables are, again, very much influenced by exogenous variables that are beyond our control, like climate change, transboundary water resources, and basin-wide development. As we know, Bangladesh sits on the confluence of 3 great river basins. The Ganges Basin, of Ganges Basin, we have only 4% within our territory. Of Brahmaputra Basin, it is 8.1, and Meghna Basin, we have only 43% of Meghna Basin. So 96% of our fresh water comes beyond our border. So these are the exogenous variables. Policy variables like population and labor supply, overall investment plan from public, private, and foreign direct investment, and river management and reservoir developments are considered as policy variable for making this plan. So the planning units are 6 hotspots. We have divided the whole of the country within 6 hotspots and 1 relatively less hazard-prone area. These hotspots are based on 8 hydrological regions. Here is a glimpse of our 6 hotspots. And the core principle of this planning is adaptive delta management that aims to support the development of an adaptive and integrated plan to enable robust and flexible decisions in delta. And if we consider adaptive delta management, we cannot thought of any endpoint solution or fixed time frames, because ADM prefers scenario planning that describes narratives, and those narratives are for plausible or possible futures which may not be the desired or preferred state. So this is a big paradigm shift for our existing planning system, because we tend to make a kind of logical framework approach, vertical logic, standalone projects. These would not be suffice for delta plan. So we need to move from a standalone approach towards integrated water resource management, and finally towards the adaptive delta management by addressing those exogenous factors like uncertainties are related to climate change. And based on that adaptive delta management principle, Bangladesh Delta Plan sets out 2 kinds of strategy. One is for national level, and other strategies are hotspot specifics. But all those strategies have some common features like basic principles of flexibility, adaptive, and no-regret projects, and prioritization of security over economic growth. And starting point of our preferred strategy is our stock taking, what we are having now in the short term. So we have made an investment plan that will end in 2030, and beyond that period, we are looking for some long-term strategies which would have 2 iconic endpoints. At one end, there is optimized water control. On the other end, there is adaptation by design. So between these 2 fag ends, we need to live with nature, and we need to adopt no-regret measures. So for the desirable feature, adaptive delta management is the preferred one, in contrast to the business as usual approach. And adaptive delta management always considers those exogenous variables. We have set 2 national issues for strategy development: the freshwater management and flood risk management. These are very much vital for our survival, our water security. And there are other strategies relevant to 6 hotspots. But all those strategies are adaptive, that can add value, and robust, no regret, and integrated. So the initial investment plan is up to 2030. We have made extensive stakeholder consultation for doing that. And there are three kinds of projects, three kinds of project cluster, I should say, within that investment plan. Zero plus is about those projects that can improve the current system of doing things. Cluster one project is about changing the current system, and cluster two is about major system change, like putting a cross dam in the sea for reclaiming land that could change the whole of the water system. So obviously, zero plus cluster projects are low risks. Larger changes include, of course, involves larger risks. So cluster 1 and 2 needs extensive study and data-driven decisions. Adaptation pathways are based on 4 kinds of scenarios, considering the threats of climate change. One is resilient, another one is productive, and third one is moderate, and finally active. So we have considered these 4 kinds of scenarios for making our adaptive pathways in the face of high climate change with high economic growth, high climate change with moderate economic growth, something like this. And for adaptation pathway, we have set some tipping points. So for example, if you consider sea level rise, one tipping point is 0.25 meter of sea level rise. And beyond 2050, if we have 0.5 meter of sea level rise, how our projects could move from cluster 1 to 2. So some kinds of flexibility of investment planning and project planning needs to be there. So the initial 80 projects are 65 of them are infrastructure projects and 15 for capacity development. These are hotspot specific and some are nationwide. So for doing that project, we need at least $2 billion investment per year for the first 5 years of Delta investment. And this is a huge task. So public finance would make the major share. Along with the investment of Bangladesh government, we are looking for Green Climate Fund and other climate financing, as well as private financing and options for public-private partnership. So the Delta plan is baseline studies, the abridged version, the detailed version, investment plan, everything is available in the website of Bangladesh Planning Commission, and relevant policies, rules, and acts are available in the website of Water Resource Planning Organization.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm going to talk about unlocking the potentials of blue biotechnology for sustaining ecological balance of Bangladesh. Before I start, let me introduce myself. I am Mohammad Nazir Hussain, Associate Professor, Department of Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. Let's talk about Bangladesh a little bit. Bangladesh, as we know, a very small country, only 148,000 square kilometers. But if you look at the population of our country, it's huge. Almost 1,200 people lives in per square kilometers. That's one of the highest in the world, actually the 7th in the world. But amazingly, we have huge sea area, the total sea area. After mitigating the dispute with Myanmar and India, we have almost 200,000 square kilometers. But what is happening in Bangladesh? In the last few decades, we are losing our forest, we are losing our hills, tracks, everything because of huge number of population. If we look at the loss of forest area in Bangladesh, maybe Bangladesh is one of the very few countries who lost thousands of acres of forest in last 20 years. You know Madhupur district or Madhupur Gaur in Tangail, one of the dense forest. It was one of the dense forests back in 1960s, but today we don't have it anymore. Only small piece of forest is remaining. That is because of huge population. And population burst is everywhere, on the roads, on the train, on the ships, everywhere you can see the population. So this huge population actually destroying the ecological balance of our country. So what's happening due to this huge population? It's creating an impact on our environment. Our physical environment is being destroyed, and the air is also getting polluted day by day. Just look at the air quality of Dhaka city. It's one of the worst in the world. And of course, the water is also getting polluted. Just look at the Buriganga of Dhaka city. It's pitch black, the water, and also the Karnafuli River in Chittagong. It's so polluted and no fish can live there. And also deforestation is going on in alarming scale. We are chopping down the trees every minute. And because of this soil degradation, what's happening? We are losing the topsoil, and as a result, we cannot grow vegetables and crops. That's why we need marine biotechnology. What is marine biotechnology or blue biotechnology? Blue biotechnology or marine biotechnology we can define as the use of marine resources or marine organisms to develop products or services of biological gain. Actually, the marine biotechnology market or blue biotechnology market is expanding all over the world, but the North America is taking the lead, followed by Europe and Asia and then rest of the world. how can this marine biotechnology can be used for our potential gain? We can get novel bioactive compounds from where we can gain some new pharmaceutical products, pollution indicators we can get. We can generate some biodegradable materials from there, and mariculture we can do. And also we have some industrial applications of marine organisms. And we can also cross-link this blue biotechnology with other sectors such as oncology, immunology, tissue engineering, environmental technology, tourism, and shipbuilding also. So there are many prospective areas of blue biotechnology and the healthcare sector, in the cosmetic industries, in the food industry, energy sector, aquaculture, marine environment, and many other sectors. Actually, we can contribute by blue biotechnology. So in global scenario, blue biotechnology is really promising. It's actually a growing market. Amid this COVID situation, blue biotechnology market is growing almost 5.84% per year. That's actually huge. But what about in Bangladesh? We have huge piece of sea, but we are not exploring it. And every minute we are burdened with 7 new faces, but we cannot provide food, and we are exhausting our land resources. Do you know that we are one of the largest rice consumers in the whole world after Laos? We consume about 438 grams of rice per person, whereas Japanese people only 119 grams of rice. In addition, Bangladeshi people, we consume less fish, only 85 grams compared to, 19 grams compared to 85 grams of fish consumptions like Japanese people. And we don't consume seaweeds. Also, although this seaweed is full of many potential bioactive compounds and nutrients, but we are not habituated to eat these seaweeds. Medicine sector, still now we are depending solely on land resources, but we are not exploring our marine resources. And in controlling environment, although the marine biotechnology can contribute much, but we are not exploring this size. So what can we do? So to maintain the ecological balance of this country, we need to explore our marine resources and exploit the technology such as marine biotechnology to sustain the ecological balance of the country. There are so many marine resources in our Bay of Bengal, so we need to explore it by systemic method.